Welcome to Uncle Jimmy's podcast. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation.
What do you both think about fear?
I'm not in this world to live up to your expectations. I'm here to live up to mine.
He who is not courageous enough to take risks will accomplish nothing in life.
Fear is a teacher.
And I don't skip class.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Uncle Jimmy's podcast. Today, we're thrilled to have a truly inspiring guest joining us, Julie Seyler. Julie is a classically trained chef, longtime baking blogger behind BitTart.com, and now the author of the fresh out-of-the-oven memoir, cookbook, Gluten for Punishment, Just Desserts for the Heartbroken, Lovesick, and Jilted. A lifelong singleton with no kids, Julie sat down to write what started as a simple cookbook, but it quickly transformed into a hilarious, heartfelt, totally unfiltered memoir about her not-so-successfully dating adventure. Along the way, she discovered that freshly baked cookies often satisfy way better than any relationship ever could. And she's not afraid to say it out loud. At 55, she reinvented herself by turning her blog into a published book, embracing humor, honesty, and the messy beauty of leaving the normal life script behind. Julie's here to share her journey of love gone awry, self-discovery in the kitchen, aging with wit, and finding joy outside the usual expectations. Julie, thank you so much for bringing your raw, real energy to the show. We're excited to dive in.
I'm excited to be here, Jimmy.
So excited. So take us back to the beginning. What sparked the idea to turn your baking passion into a cookbook? And how did it unexpectedly morph into a full-blown memoir about your dating life?
So I had been doing the blog since 2008, and it was sort of always a mashup of sort of what was in my head at any given time and then whatever recipe I was working on at the time. And they never really coincided. And then like a lot of people in 2019, I needed a project. It was actually 2020. I needed a project because the pandemic had hit. We were all at home. I had just gotten out of a very ugly, messy relationship. And I wanted something to keep me busy. So a friend of mine actually said, well, why don't you do a cookbook? And I'm like, I've thought about doing a cookbook for years, but I don't know what to focus on. I don't know if I want to focus, do I want to do lemon desserts or do I want to do stone fruit desserts? And she says, well, why don't you just make it like your blog? I'm like, that's easy. So that was originally, I thought it was going to be a cookbook. And then maybe every couple pages, there would just be a short little snippet of my life in there. About what's going on in my world. But I sat down, I had some recipes done and I sat down to write my first snippet and it was 30 pages long. And I was like, okay, this was the Brett chapter. And I was like, okay, I guess I have more to say than I thought I did. And then I sat down to do another one and the same thing happened. And so the book sort of told me what it wanted to be. I'm like, okay, I guess this is going to be a memoir with recipes versus a cookbook with some little short stories in it.
So you just started writing and it took off. It took a life of its own.
Yes. There was no plan for this to be a memoir at all when I started. I just let the process take me where it wanted to take me. I'm not, I don't have a master's in English literature. Writing is not really in my background. I've done some writing for marketing materials and stuff like that. I had time. And I had a computer and I just let it go and let it take me where it wanted to take me.
That's awesome. So as a lifelong singleton by choice or circumstance, what's one of the biggest misconceptions people have about women who stay single and child-free?
I think there's the hater sort of vision, which is I'm home alone in my apartment with 2 cats and I'm super sad and I'm just, in my robe all day. There's other people who think, even not the haters, there's other people who sort of think I'm somehow unfulfilled with not being a wife or not having a partner, not having children. And I'm not saying that can't be fulfilling, but I knew for me, it just wasn't the right path. I've really been able to do some things that I don't think I could have ever done in a traditional family situation. I've been able to carve out my own path within, back when I was working, but then was able to go to culinary school, was able to write this book, was able to travel in my own home. I was able to retire, 10 years earlier. I still have the 2 cats, but And I'm okay calling myself the crazy cat lady if that's what people want. But I just like what I've been able to do. And I like when I am home, I don't have to confer with somebody when I want to spend money to buy something. And I can sit around and eat cookies for dinner and no one's going to tell me I can't. So it gives me a lot of freedom. And I don't think I would change it for the world.
Yeah,
My
you can do your
last
own thing.
Yes, my last boyfriend, I said early on, we had a long relationship, but I'm like, don't even ask because I don't want to get married. We were talking for a while about maybe having like 2 properties on a lot. So we each had our own property, but then we could also hang out together.
No, that's awesome because I'm 41. I have no kids. I'm divorced. I was married, but I have no kids. Same thing with me. I have 2 nephews and a niece who I adore and I get to spend time with. But at the end of the day, I get to give them back.
Right.
Not mine.
Exactly.
And I love it. I live. I wouldn't say by myself, but I have a studio apartment in Boston. I live with my aunt and uncle upstairs, who I love to death, who if it wasn't for them, I don't know where I would be. And my 2 cousins, one's off in college, but the other one lives here and she's always busting my balls and we have fun. But, I love it. I wouldn't change it for the world either. I have no kids. I've been in I've been in a relationship, my last relationship with my ex-girlfriend who had a couple kids. It was fun.
Right.
It was fun. But I don't have any kids of my own. So I get to do my own thing. So you've said freshly baked cookies satisfy better than any relationship. Tell us about a specific heartbreak where baking literally saved the day.
The one that I'm thinking about was the breakup that happened right during the pandemic. And I was able to secure a 5-pound bag of yeast from a restaurant they weren't able to actually serve food. So they were like selling their products. And I don't know if like for yeast, you usually use about a tablespoon. You don't ever use like 5 pounds. So I had a lot of yeast and I could do a lot of baking. And so when that all went down with just, flour and some yeast and some water, I was just making bread. And that to me allowed me to really get my frustrations out because I'm kneading and I'm in there and I'm slapping the bread around and I'm throwing it around, working all that sort of frustration and anger into this bread that then, comes out of the oven and smells wonderful. And I'm able to share it with neighbors and have some myself, slather some butter on it. So that was in the book, the title of that chapter, I think, is kneading soulless, but kneading it as in the word kneading like bread.
Yeah, no, that's awesome because I think oftentimes after a breakup, a nice freshly baked, cookies is one of the biggest things.
Right.
They're not going to they're not going to upset you. I can tell you that.
Right. Exactly.
Because I oftentimes feel like sometimes in relationships, I don't know how many you've been in, and I know you haven't been married, but they can be tough, they can be challenging, but they can also be very rewarding as well. And sometimes those ones that are very rewarding do end, and unfortunately, it does feel like the world's ending.
Right.
And when you come home and there's a nice freshly baked thing of cookies, it's a good thing. My Mama Mikey out in Minnesota, she bakes the best cookies I've ever had in my life.
Really?
Oh yeah. She won't give me the recipe. No one has the recipe but her, but I think it involves probably a couple pounds of butter, but it is the best. When I go out there and visit my family in Minnesota, we get cookies and she'll bring, 2 big Tupperware containers of them whenever I visit. And I don't think it's just when I visit. She likes to say it is. I think she does that every week for them out there,
Right.
But
I think for some of us, like her and for me as well, it's our love language, is how we show love, to be able to bake something and give them to somebody and have them enjoy it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Because when when it may be just because the cookies are the best because they're made with love.
That's true. That's true. That could
You know?
be.
Yeah, that could be it too. I never
Love
thought of
and
it.
butter. I like both
Yeah.
love and butter, equal
Yeah.
amounts.
So your book title, Gluten for Punishment, is brilliant and cheeky. What's the story behind that name, and how does it capture your dating experiences?
So the book, first of all, a lot of people think that this means that they're gluten-free recipes. They're not. They're gluten-loving recipes. And I actually I had some trouble coming up with the right sort of title. Like, the book is cheeky, and I wanted to capture that. I deal with some serious subjects in there, but it's definitely done with a wink. So I actually had a friend who was in marketing, and we were sort of bouncing ideas, and nothing was hitting. And I have this on my desk, I have this little coaster that somebody gave me at some point, and it says "full of gluten" is what it says. And I looked at him and I said, "What about gluten for punishment?" He hated it. He was not sold on it at all. And I'm like, I'm really kind of liking this one. And so that's where the title came from.
That's awesome. So you started your blog, 2bittart.com, years ago. How has sharing your unfiltered stories online shaped your voice as a writer?
When I first started the blog, no one knew about it. So I was doing it, I tend to think about stuff all the time. So I had all these thoughts in my head that wouldn't go away. And so I really started it just as a place to throw down my thoughts. I had a few people who didn't know me that followed me, but in general, nobody I knew what it was. I didn't tell them what the name of it was or anything else. And then when I really started pairing it with the dessert recipes, which happened in, I think, late 2009, maybe early 2010, I started sort of telling people about it. And I didn't want to change the way I wrote. So, I was able to write freely before, and I wanted to continue to be able to write freely, whether people liked it or not, I guess is what I would say, whether people were shocked or not. So I don't know how much it's really shaped me as much as it's taught me to write, because like I said, I didn't really have any background in it. Although it's funny because I've trying to go back on certain pieces from 2008, 2009, maybe clean up my blog a bit. And what I said back then, I still believe today. My thoughts actually haven't, maybe I say I'm a little more clear now in my writing, but I still actually like what I wrote back then, which is a testament to sort of that my conviction in what I'm saying and my belief in what I'm seeing. Yeah.
Yeah, and you still believe it to this day, and that's the best thing, So
yeah.
When you were writing, right, you said you first started off your blog, you were anonymous almost somewhat.
Yes,
right?
I was, yes.
So how was your writing when you were anonymous, right? Did it feel a little easier knowing that you didn't know people that were reading it, or?
I think it did. I really try not to think about who's reading what I'm writing. I dig into some things that, I didn't have the best relationship with my father. There was not physical abuse, but there was definitely emotional and mental abuse. When I write this stuff, I think, I have brothers and sisters that didn't necessarily experience what I experienced, and how are they going to take it? And I just have to put that inside and say, understanding that this is my truth. I'm sure my father, if he was alive, would have a different perspective. And I think that there's probably even a third truth out there that's my perspective and part his perspective. So all I can really do is explain to people what I experienced, and then also try to understand where he's coming from. And that's one thing, even in my book, that I've really tried to do, is instead of just blasting people, is try to figure out, get some empathy into why he was the way he was. He did not have an easy life either. And so I'm able to maybe give him some grace that way, I guess is what I would say.
Grace and a little bit of leeway, So writing a memoir means getting really vulnerable.
Yes.
Were there any dating stories you hesitated to include, or did you go full throttle with the truth?
So I hesitated throughout the process, wrote everything the way that it was, and sort of hoping that maybe my editor would edit some of this stuff out, or every time that I tried to edit myself into what I included, it sounded really flat on the page. And I realized I just needed to just let it flow out of me. And then at some other point, maybe we could talk about what stays and what goes. I didn't include anything. Like I said, this wasn't like a revenge book with the men that I had dated. So I didn't include anything that didn't carry the story forward. So there's some horrific things I could have included, and I didn't, because it didn't really need to be in the story. And then, I had written the book, and I'm like, am I going to really publish this? Because I let it all fly. I really do. And even today, I'll get somebody that I worked with that's an executive high up in the company will reach out to me and say, "Hey, I read your book." And I'm like, "Oh my God." Because I'm talking about oral sex, I'm talking about everything in this book. But the thing that I think is that not everybody maybe talks about what I talk about in my book, but everyone's probably experienced it. You're not telling me this guy hasn't done that. So my neighbor's just like, "Yeah, I finished your book." And I'm like, "Hi, neighbor." But, hopefully, if nothing else, I think the stories that I tell and the embarrassing stories I tell about myself will allow other people to find a connection in the stories that they've been there. They've had those ridiculous moments. They've had those embarrassing moments. Just, they've been in those situations just like I have.
Yeah. And you write the memoir, to get your story out there, but you also to help others as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's what you got to think of in the long run is, maybe it may be embarrassing and, but I'm still going to get it out there because one of the things I just started myself was Mental Health Mondays. I do a segment now on Mondays where I release an episode talking about mental health, my mental health, and we have a guest on who also speaks about theirs. But, I think it too often men alone, don't speak about mental health. I think
Right.
they tuck it away and they say it's okay. I say it all the time. My father died at 9. I lost my dad. He was 52. My mom was 4 years ago on Sunday. So I've lost both parents. I had seven siblings, including myself. My older sister, who was my cousin, passed away at 40. So, I've had a lot of loss and I've been seeing a therapist for 16 years. Some days are good. Some days are bad. But my mental health is in the forefront now where I'm getting older and I'm trying to, concentrate on the podcast, concentrate on life in general, relationships, friendships, trying to foster those. But I truly think I'll probably end up, alone by myself till, I go, but I'm okay with that.
Right. Yeah. And I think women do, I believe, usually have a better support system where we can talk about those things a lot of times men don't talk about. In fact, today I listened to the first of your Mental Health Mondays program, the podcast earlier today. Yeah. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm, very vulnerable and I open up, not because I want a pat on the back but I just want people to know that, some days it's okay not to be okay. But as long as you support, as long as you have that support, you have people that you can talk to, or I say it all the time, there's 988, which you can call, text, the suicide and crisis hotline. That's 24/7. It's manned. Someone will always answer. I feel like one person taking their life, whether it's a male or female, is one too many.
Right.
Because it hits home, and it doesn't only, the finality of someone taking their life is obviously their life's gone, but they don't realize and people don't take into effect the crisis that's left behind with the family.
And a lot of times they say, "I thought you'd be better off without me." That's never the case. It's like, that's not how it works. I don't care how messed up you are or how depressed you are. We love you. Stay around. We love you.
Exactly. I say, we love you. You deserve to be here. You should be here.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, call that number. You can call my number. My number's everywhere. You can find it. My phone's always on, and I can always be just in someone that will listen.
Yeah.
If you're ever feeling that way, because it's tough. Life can be tough. It's not easy. Some days are better than others, but we only get one life. So, let's just keep living it and live it, for the best.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, I definitely agree. And I've unfortunately dealt with suicide, and I've dealt with, not for myself, but people that I know, and depression. You just, you wish you had like, for me, I wish I had reached out, or I wish they knew that they could reach out to me in that situation.
Yeah.
Because I'm here. I'm here if you need me.
Yeah. Like I had Maddie on, you probably listened to her, and we were talking about it where, people tell you all the time, tough it out, get over it. It's okay.
Yeah.
If it was that easy, I would get out of bed and we'd go.
I know. We'd be like, okay, let's go. Let's get started.
And I talked about it some days. For me, a win's just simply, getting out of bed, taking a shower, and headed to work. That's a win for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I've talked to my sister, I talked to actually my sister, there's an app that I use that, depending on where I am on that spectrum, one of the things that you can do to like win points is it's just like, just get out of bed, just survive the day. It's stuff like that. And some days that's a win.
Yeah, that's
You
the
have
best
to
you
count
can
that
do.
as a win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I say every day we wake up is a blessing, every day we get to get another shot at this, So at 55, you published your first book. What was the
Yes.
moment you decided it was time to reinvent yourself and chase this dream?
Well, as we had talked about, COVID had sort of set me on the COVID project that a lot of people had, kind of set me on this path. And then I knew I was going to retire early, but I had worked for 22 years actually, with the same group of people in different companies, and they were fantastic. And there's not a lot of people who can say that they love their work. I loved who I worked with. I loved our CEO. He was just so supportive and just really did things right. Found out that company was closing. And at 55, I didn't want to go out for another year and a half or whatever, try to find another company that was like the one that I was at. So I just decided to retire a little bit earlier than I was expecting, and, talked to my financial planners and said, is this possible? And they said, yeah, absolutely, that's possible. So all of a sudden, I've got all this time on my hand that I wasn't expecting. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to treat it like a job. I'd get up every morning. I'm lucky enough to have like a little guest house in the back of my, behind my house. That's my office. I'd go out there and I'd write all day, come in and come home. So I was able to plug through it after sort of playing for, I would say, a couple of years, to just plug through it and get it written, get it edited, and get it out. So it was, I'm a person that tends to really look at glass half full. So for me, it was like, versus saying, oh my God, we just lost our jobs. This company's, they're closing down this company. I've just lost my job. What am I going to do? I said, all right, universe is telling me it's time for me to finish this book. So that was what I did. That was how I got into it. So it's been interesting to sort of reinvent myself. My profession, I was a corporate event planner, for 22 years. So I was taking 1,200 people to Hawaii for a week. That was my job.
Yeah.
This is very different.
So
and learning the ropes on it.
Yeah. So you retire, and then you basically go to your full-time job now of being an author.
Yeah, I tell people that. I'll say I'm retired, and one of my friends will always say, you're not retired. She's like, you're working as hard as you used to work. I'm like, that is true. I think I am.
Exactly. But it's great though, you're able to get out of there at a young age and start your new life, per se. And, so you take it to writing, which is great. Because I find, I could show you over here, I have, 25 different notebooks just filled of, I love to write, and it's just,
Right.
Whether it's simple poetry or just simple, hey, today's this, today's that, or, I love to write. And it's one of those where you can sort of take your story, right? That, you write your book, you write your memoir. And so you put your all into it, hoping that, hey, people are going to read it. People are going to appreciate it. And what was the feedback when it came out?
The feedback has been really, really positive. Floored. I was humbled and floored by the feedback from various readers that have reached out to me or have posted things on, Amazon or on any of the other sites. And what really surprised me was when I wrote it, I thought I was talking, my audience was going to be females that sort of have lived my life kind of in my Gen X age range. And the men who have read it that have given me positive feedback is really surprising. So it actually transcends gender. I think it transcends sexuality. I think anybody who's gone through relationships can understand it. And I was a guest at a book club recently, and I had a woman talking about one of my relationships and talking about how it mirrored her experience in a cult. So it's really, I love the fact that people from various walks of life can overlay their story on top of my story and it resonates. That's like the best thing that somebody can tell me, is that it resonated with them.
Yeah, it must make you feel good.
It does. writing this, I didn't know where this was going. My editor believed in me, but I wasn't sure. And so the feedback has been.
That's awesome. So dating in your 50s and beyond, right? How has it changed compared to earlier decades? And what absurd or hilarious moments stand out for you?
Gosh, there's a lot in there. So, so right now I'm not dating. I feel like I've got so much on my plate right now. I don't think I could really put the time and effort a relationship needs. But also I feel like any man recently who has been interested in me, I call the book my man repellent, because I give them a copy of the book, they read the book, and all of a sudden I've been ghosted. And I'm not sure if that's because I'm so raw and so honest, or they're afraid they're going to be in like volume 2. But I did have, and I think I mentioned this already, my last relationship was with somebody for 4 years. And this was during the process of writing the book. And so he read the book as I was creating it. And I'm sure parts of it were really hard for him to read, but I chose differently with him. And I chose somebody that I don't think I would have gone out necessarily with, but he was kind and he was interesting. And there's just, he loves, I don't know how to explain it, but he loves animals. It's just, it wasn't this something shiny. It was definitely something that was more a slow burn and heartfelt. And it's probably one of the best relationships I've ever had. Even our breakup was really positive experience, and we still talk all the time. We text each other, not necessarily talk, but we text each other all the time on things. So I think I'm slowly learning. It took me into my 50s to figure out the kind of man that I want. And it's very different than what I was doing in my 20s and 40s.
Yeah. So what, your last relationship, you said, ended after 4 years, and you guys went your separate ways, but it was amicable, and you guys, still keep up with each other. And, was it, who broke up with who? Did you break up with him? Did he break up with you, or just mutual?
He broke up with me, but I think it was a mutual thing. He was the one who said it. And I said, you're probably right. And a lot of it was he had moved away. And so we were dealing with a long distance thing. There was a lot of, I would say, like a lot of us, both of us were sort of, it was the beginning of the most recent presidency. And so I think both of us were kind of on edge in his job, which is he works as a park ranger. He didn't know if he was going to have a job or not. He didn't know what he was going to do. So there was just a lot of pressure on us, plus distance, and plus I was trying to get the book out, and I think it was just a little bit too much. I think it was just a little bit too much.
And sometimes the biggest form, I say of not form, what's the word I'm looking for? But sometimes the biggest thing when it comes to love, right, is letting go, right? Can be another sign of love. Letting go, because it's going to be, you're going to be in different states, or there's different things going on where it's not going to work. So instead of, pushing through and hurting one another, right? The biggest gift of my love is saying, hey, go do your thing. I love you still. I understand. I appreciate it. And we're still going to talk. We're still going to text back and forth, make sure we're good and check in on you. And, that's one of the biggest forms of love, I think, being able to let go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's an acknowledgement to him in the back of the book, which I wrote after we had broken up. And it's, it still talks about just, he was after the shit show, excuse my language, but the shit show of who I dated before him. I needed him in my life. And it was such a positive thing. It was such a positive relationship. Yeah.
That's good. Like I said, sometimes the hardest part is letting go, but that is another form of love as well.
Right. Absolutely.
So as a trained chef, right? How do your desserts tie into processing emotions? Is baking a form of therapy for you?
It is, absolutely, yeah. So I've done my stint in therapy, and writing the book was its own kind of therapy. Baking is almost like a movie meditation, I would say. I don't know if you go about life I go about life, and sometimes things work and sometimes they don't, and I stumble and I fall. Baking, I feel like is really where I know I can succeed. I feel like I'm in the zone. They talk about sports being in the zone. I'm in the zone. So time doesn't mean anything to me, and what's going on around me, I don't care. And whatever issues possibly I'm having in life, they just sort of flit away. and I'm focused on my recipe and creating this recipe. And at the end of it, even if my life is shit, I've created this beautiful thing that,
Yeah.
again, I can call up my neighbor and say, hey, can I bring some of this over to you? And, make them happy. So for me, it's movie meditation. It's my bomb shelter if everything else is going sideways. And I don't know, I couldn't I couldn't not have that in my life. My oven had broken, it was broken, and it was broken for a while. I couldn't get anybody to fix it correctly. And so I was in there trying to figure out every no-bake dessert I could ever make, because I still needed to be in there and I still needed to be baking stuff.
So that's awesome, though. That's like your way of, of going to therapy almost, going into the
Yes.
kitchen. And one of the biggest things I think you said is that you've never failed in the kitchen, which is great. It sort of makes me want to be your neighbor, to try all these treats. And, I've lost almost like 90 pounds, but I think if I lived next to you, I'd probably gain about 200 pounds by trying all
I
these
know.
treats.
That's why I have to give them away, because I can't have it in my house. And I do have to say, I definitely failed, but I feel like every time I failed, it's been a learning experience. So, a recipe, creating a recipe, it a lot of times will take 7 times before your recipe is perfect.
Okay.
But it's like if I'm making something and I'm tasting it, I'm like, okay, I really like this, but this could be a little different. And sort of tweaking it along the way, to me, that's not a fail. That's a win. That's like,
Yeah.
we're moving forward. It's like anything you try to do, you try it for the first time, it's not perfect. But if you're going the right direction, then you're winning. You're still winning.
Enhancing the flavor, you're changing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Taking a little bit away from this and giving more to that,
Yes.
It's great. So what's one recipe from your book that best represents a particular chapter of your dating journey, and why?
There's a chapter that's called Dexter, and in it's sort of the entire story is based upon this German chocolate cake. When I start dating somebody, one of the first questions I ask them is like, what's your favorite dessert, or what's your favorite flavor? And so Dexter had said, I love a German chocolate cake. And so I had worked on this recipe for him. I'd worked on this recipe for him and kind of perfected it. And it's like this like the richest German chocolate cake you've ever had. I love it. I've made it multiple times. But this cake sort of is woven throughout the story that, I was going to make it for him. I ended up not making it for him. It never happened. So I stuck that recipe in there because I've made it multiple times for people who are deserving of my love and are deserving of my heart and my desserts, but he never got.
So that's a little pushback for him, of not treating you right and doing the right thing, of he didn't get to try it.
So, maybe his girlfriend gets my book and she makes it for him and then he gets it. But
so you describe your stories as a little too unfiltered. What's
Yes.
the wildest or most candid thing that you've shared publicly that surprised even you?
Geez, wow. I mean, there's a few of them. I talk about the fact that I do look at Pornhub. I am a Pornhub user. And that does come out in the book, and I'm like, you know what? It's out there. I talk about the fact that I do have devices next to my bedside. I'm a single woman, and a lot of single women do.
No judging here.
I know. So those are the things when, like again, when I'm talking to my neighbor and he says he's just read my book. I'm just like, yeah, hi neighbor.
Yeah, and if he's watching too much Pornhub, here you come with some dessert, and he's single, you're single. Like, hey,
I know,
what's
you
gonna
never
happen
know.
next?
God, don't put that thought in his.
So how has writing the memoir helped you make peace with past relationships or lack thereof?
Every single day, I used to say this, I used to be so exhausted. Every single day I went in there to write. It was not only the stress of trying to write a book, which I had never done before, but it was a therapy session. I mean, to slow down and remember what happened, to write it out, it was a therapy session for me. This wasn't, none of this was planned. So it took writing the book to see the patterns that I had been repeating in my life, to see where those patterns came from, and to understand what I needed to change it. And I think no therapist has ever given me that. I have been, like I said, I have been in therapy before. to sort of figure it out for myself and figure out what's going on and what's always been going on was just such an aha moment for me. I didn't know how the book was going to end, and that was really it. That's sort of how the book ends is me sort of figuring it all out and seeing what I did and seeing what I needed to do to change it.
Yeah, I often say, right, in therapy, and I don't know if you'll agree with this as well, but I find that most of my work, my mental health or, my well-being, when it comes to therapy, that most of the great work that's been done in my life has always been by myself in silence with either my own thoughts or writing. Nothing a therapist, could do for me.
Yeah. And it's
know?
funny, the last therapist I saw, I would bring in these pages that I had written and I'm like, let me read this to you. This is what my thoughts were. That should have been the green flag that says, hey girl, you need to write this into a book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I first started going to therapy, I was paying, it was pretty expensive. I was paying this guy, but he was the best therapist I ever had. And what he would do is I would go in weekly and he would have me write. It would be an hour session. I would go in and for the first 15 to 20 minutes, I would write. And then he would take it, and we'd go through it, we'd talk. And then when the session ended, he would take the book and he would put it up on his shelf and he would say, I'll see you next week. And I would come back next week and we'd go through, what I had wrote again, and I would write again. So for me, when I try to problem solve, right, I always write. And people are like, what do you write? And I'm like, I'm trying to figure this out. Like, I could be having a conversation with somebody and sometimes I'm sitting there writing notes and they're like, are you taking notes? Yeah, I want to figure this out, like.
Right. Let me
And
think about it.
Yeah, I got to think about it. And that's one of the biggest things I had to do when, I felt like my world was crumbling and it was the end of the world in my last relationship. I took stock and I looked myself in the mirror and I said to myself, I'm going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
Right.
It's not the end of the world. I'm going to be okay. And then I sat with myself in silence and, I ended up forgiving myself, forgiving others for hurting me. And, I still struggle, from time to time and still have to go to the therapy and do all that. But, I'm a work in progress like we all are.
Right. Absolutely.
Nobody's perfect.
I love that you're a therapist though. That would have been
Wow, that was
great.
awesome.
And then to not only have at the end of it, to have all of these pages that sort of chronicle your journey as well.
Yeah.
I wish I had a therapist like that.
It was, that was when I first started it and I couldn't find a therapist and I ended up going to this guy in downtown Boston. I remember him telling me his hourly price. And I said, you want to see me how many times? 4 times a month? Like, I can't afford this. I said, I just started my job on the railroad 4 years ago. I don't have this type of money. And he goes, look, I'll work with you. Just come once a week and we'll figure it out. And he was very good to me.
Yeah,
He
that's
didn't,
great.
At the time it was about $250 an hour.
Jeez, that is a lot.
And I was making probably, 15, 16 years ago, I was probably making $400, $500 a week, but I didn't
Right.
pay that. He gave me a very great rate and he was very good to me. And I still often think when I go to, I just started a new therapist recently and it was the whole process starting over again, of what kind of medication you want. Oh, let's change this for that or this. And I'm just like, here we go again.
I know. You're having to tell the whole story about yeah, I know.
Exactly. How we got to this point,
Right.
So it can be tough, but I tell people in mental health, make sure you address it. If you're feeling some type of way, call somebody that will listen because you deserve to be here. We want you here. We want
Right.
everybody here, So for listeners who feel stuck in their own normal script, what's one piece of advice you'd give about reinventing yourself at any age?
So for people who are, I think that, I've never lived the normal scripted life. And I think that every person that has succumbed to the scripted life, they have a freak flag that they're just not flying. And I think that that's one of the things that people need to do. I mean, I hate that term, like dance like no one's watching, but you just need to let your crazy out. You need to, if you've always wanted to do something, try it. It doesn't matter if you're, it doesn't matter if you're in your 50s or your 60s or your 70s. If you're still alive, try it. See what it's all about. Just go and explore and do the things that scare you. Like that for me has been the big thing with this book is writing the book and publishing it and getting it out there and even doing podcasts and that's not my comfort zone, but I'm out there every day and doing things that scare me. And I think it's awesome. Like, I love it.
No, that's, one of the biggest things for me is I've been on this weight loss journey. I've lost almost 100 pounds.
That's
And,
fantastic.
one of the
Congratulations.
biggest things I wanted to do was, and this is when I realized, I was always a big guy, but this is when I realized, like, Jesus, how big am I? I wanted to go skydiving, right? And I hate heights, but I just wanted to do it.
Jeez.
And
Yeah.
so I call up the company and I say, hey, I want to make an appointment. How much do you weigh? And I tell them, like, hey, you got to lose like 80 pounds. You're too heavy. We can't do that. And so one of my biggest things when I started losing weight, I was like, hey, I want to get to this goal so I can skydive, and skydiving opens up here in May in Massachusetts where I am. So I will be skydiving. I'm going to put it up, a video of it all. And I can't wait. I'm so excited,
That is, that's
You know?
awesome. That's
Yeah, so that's one of my
congratulations.
goals,
Yeah.
one of my other goals is to get back to California, to LA, and into, there's so much. I love true crime. I love it.
Do
And
too.
LA has it all,
Yes. Yeah.
Last time I was out there, I visited, obviously, this is a bit ghoulish for some people, but I went to, Nicole Brown Simpson up on Brentwood where that happened to see.
Yeah.
And I tell people this, I was able to go into the Menendez house.
Were you? Oh, wow.
It was when and I'll tell you the story briefly. So me and my ex-girlfriend, we go and we show up and they were doing construction and the contractor was there. So I start talking to him and shooting the shit with them. And, I'm from Boston. We shoot the shit with everybody. And, this guy's the great, we're talking and he's like, hey, once we move the trucks, you can come out front and take a photo. And then 10 minutes later, he's like, hey, you know what? I never do this. Just come on in the house.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
like, okay. I'm getting choked up now. When I went into the house, the upstairs alone, the parents' bedroom, I didn't go upstairs. My ex-girlfriend did, but I didn't go upstairs because I could barely step foot in the house. Their bedroom alone was 1,200 square feet.
Oh my gosh.
And these houses in Beverly, have you been to Beverly Hills?
I've driven through Beverly Hills.
The houses look small, some of them, right? But once you get inside, they go way back.
They go way back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when I tell you this, I step in the house and I talk for a living and I can talk. And when I went in that house, I felt like someone was like choking me where I couldn't even talk.
Really?
It was like this dark energy that came into my body and all the hairs on my body was standing up where I stepped outside and I finally was like, I can breathe. And then I went back in and I felt the same thing. And I just felt this uneven, this very scary presence in this house, dark.
Imagine buying that house after it happened. Like my house, I knew it was my house when I walked in. It had really great energy.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I could ever, not that I could afford a house like that, but I don't feel like I could buy a house like that. I'm a huge true crime person too. In fact, that's what I watch when I'm trying to like go to sleep at night. I rock like forensic files and stuff like that.
Yeah. And then I wonder why I wake up with crazy nightmares and
Exactly. People are like, are you crazy? I'm like, there's something about it.
There is.
I read somewhere that it's because when you're watching it, there's like a sense of control is part of what it is like there's a sense of control of things because you're not involved in it. You're sort of watching from outside of it, which I'm like, okay, I don't know why. It's better than saying like, I'm a psychopath or something, because I do love them.
Oh yeah. So, and then when we leave, right, we leave the Menendez house. And when I say this, we pull down the street, I'm driving and my ex-girlfriend, her daughter calls and she answers the phone and I open the door and I threw up.
Oh my gosh.
When I tell you, it felt like these dark forces were inside me almost. Where they just came out, and I felt better. Wow. I felt so much better, but I have never been in a house where I've been, I don't get scared easy. I don't get creeped out.
Right. Yeah,
I mean, I am afraid of the dark. I do sleep with a stuffed animal, but, this was one of the places where I've been to, like, even when I went to Brentwood when Nicole Brown was killed, all the hair on my body was just standing up because it was like, there's this energy there,
Right.
And, I went to the house where one of the famous mobsters was killed, shot through the window. There was a whole tour of things that I did my own where I knew where the houses were.
Where it was, yeah.
Yeah, where it was. But it was, when I went to bungalow, I think it was bungalow number 8 or 9 in the Beverly Hills Hotel where JFK and Marilyn Monroe supposedly spent a lot of time there.
Had some fun.
They had some fun, yeah. If only those walls could talk.
Did you go to the Black Dahlia location by any chance?
We went there, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit of everything. And I would just love to go back and just do that, for 7 days and just, because there's so much there,
There
so
is.
much. And
Yeah.
it's just like people probably going to listen to this and be like, yeah, there's something wrong with that guy, I do have mental health Mondays, obviously. So there are
There
some
you
issues,
go.
so.
Yeah, I have a friend who lived in the hotel where Richard Ramirez used to live. The what did they call him?
I know exactly who you're talking about. Yeah.
I want to say Hillside Strangler, but that wasn't it. The Night Stalker, where he was living while he was doing all of this stuff. And so I had a friend that lived there, and I'm like, no, thank you.
Creepy.
I don't think I want to go in his room.
Yeah, I went up, I also went up to the Tate house, it's up on the hill. Which is very interesting, and then you read about it, and it was like, I think it was one of the band, I forget what band it was, but one of the guys rented the house, and he actually, when he left, I think it was 9 Inch Nails, he took the door.
Yeah.
And still has
it was, I think it was 9 Inch Nails. I remember when that was going on.
But California is different. We were driving through Beverly Hills and we saw, it had to have been 18, 19-year-old kids on the front lawn drinking. They had a DJ, in front of their house, and they had a food truck. And I'm just like,
oh my God.
Yeah, this isn't California, this isn't California per se. This is Beverly Hills, and it was just so interesting.
I was going to say, that doesn't happen in my neighborhood.
But it's definitely a place where if you want to go see a little bit of everything, California is the place to be.
I would agree. And it's, today it was 80 today. I can't complain. We're in the middle of January and it's 80 degrees and that,
I think we're 22 here, 22 degrees today in Boston.
It's okay. I'll take our gas prices for the chance to just be able to go and walk around and have it be sunny outside and everybody's in a good mood.
That's one of the biggest things I remember in being in California was in Beverly Hills, we, were basically out of gas. And I think it was $5.12 or $5.15 a gallon. And I'm like,
yeah, I know. It's
very
crazy.
expensive,
It is crazy, especially up in LA. It's very expensive.
So aging, identity, and dating. How do you approach these topics with humor without downplaying the real challenges?
Wow. I think you have to, aging and identity, I don't know if you can change it. We're going to get old. I'm 58 now. We're going to age. Stuff doesn't work like it used to. I can tell you that. I try to get down off the floor and I feel like a baby giraffe trying to get off the floor these days. So you can either hate it or you can sort of laugh at it.
Yeah, you can embrace it,
You can just embrace it. I try to do the best I can. I try to get I try to stay healthy. I try to do what I can. But you just gotta, grab it by the horns and go with it. I was never a fan really of Pamela Anderson back in her day, but I love Pamela Anderson now and this new look that she has where she's sort of really embracing her age and embracing what she looks like and she's owning it. And I think it's awesome. And the same thing with dating. Dating is not easy. Anybody who says it is lying. Dating's a mess. Online dating is a mess. Trying to figure out if things are going to work or not work. So you have to laugh at it, or you get frustrated and you give up. Is sort of what I feel like.
I've given up on dating. I'll do my podcast and my work, and come home and watch, Trump talk for crazy 2 hours today. I'll just dating. I'll put that on the back burner,
Yeah. And it's on the back burner for me right now. I hope it's not ending. I hope at one point I decide to go out there again and get into the messiness of it. But just right now I'm taking a break.
Yeah, same here. If it comes and smacks me in the face, that's a different story. If I meet somebody and it's just meant to be, it's meant to be. But otherwise, I'm not seeking, I'm not looking. I'm just, trying to take care of my mental health and trying to take care of myself day to day. I've
Yeah.
focused most of my life, unfortunately, taking care of everybody else, trying to at least, and neglected myself for too long. So, the next 6 months for a year for me will be rebuilding myself and, living the life that I want to. I travel a lot, so I'm still going to travel, and I'm just going to have fun with it because life's
Right.
short. Time waits for none of us, and I'm going to have fun with it.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, definitely, I know that you said that both your parents had passed away, and that's my parents had passed too. And I know that dealing with aging parents and dealing with that whole situation takes a lot out of you. And that when you're focused on that, you can't really focus on anything else. And unfortunately, I've got I'm the baby of the family, and I got brothers and sisters that are now getting into their 70s. And so I feel like, I'm going to have to start helping them out as well. Maybe not taking care of them, but helping them out as they get older as well. So when you are able to focus on yourself, it's really a good time, do it while you can kind of
Yeah,
situation.
exactly.
Do it if you need to. And I think when I'm ready to date again, I think I have the perfect litmus test now, which is I just hand them my book, let them read it, and then if they call me, then that means that they can deal with me as a person, I guess.
That's awesome. So your blog, right? It's been running for 17 years. What keeps you coming
Crazy.
back to share your kitchen chaos and life's musings?
I know it's crazy. I don't think I've ever done anything for 17 years. So it's really, it's crazy. I still have things that I want to talk about, and things that I want to say. It's just weird stuff that either has happened to me, or talking about my position on religion, or not even my position, but what I think about religion or what I think about spirituality. I feel like if I keep it all inside me, my brain's going to explode. So I have to get it out there. And now I have a forum, where people come and they read what I have to say, and they're usually nice about, they're usually nice about it. And the same with these recipes is I have to create. And if I'm going to create, why not share them? Because if somebody else makes it and then they write me a little note saying, hey, this was fabulous, I made these and this was great, that just makes me happy. Like, share the love.
Yeah.
You had mentioned that your grandmother doesn't share her recipe. There's not a recipe that I won't share. I will share any
Okay.
recipe that I have. If you love what I've made and you want to try it at home, here it is.
I want to try your cooking. I want to try your bacon.
Maybe I can ship you some. Maybe we can
I
get
would
some
love
things
to
that
try some. It just seems, it seems like that's one of your biggest passions, which is great
it
because
is.
a lot
Yeah.
of times throughout life, we get stuck in that rat race, right? Of, I go to work, I come home, I eat dinner, I go to sleep, I wake up, I have breakfast, I do it again, and I do it again till I get to retire. And oftentimes, some of us don't get to retire. We don't get
Right.
to that point of retirement because we either pass or we get sick, or, some people
Got
now
bills to
with
pay.
bills to pay, and with the economy the way it is, and with the jobs the way they are,
Yeah.
people may not have that opportunity to retire. So I love the passion that you have because, I've been in my job 20 years. I've been doing it 20 years. I started off as a janitor and worked my way up throughout
Mhm.
the company and what I do, and I came right out of high school into work. And I still have another 19 years to go till I can retire. Not like I'm counting or anything, but I got a great 401k, got a great retirement plan, which is awesome. But my passion is traveling, and the other night I got back to photography is something that I love to do. In Boston, I don't know if you watched or listened to the Matty Andrews interview, but the beginning of the video, there's a video on YouTube. Those pictures that I took were ones that I took in Boston over the
Okay.
weekend. Yeah, because they have like this art exhibit where they have like an octopus coming out of a building, like the legs and stuff. It was so cool. So I went in to do my photography, and I often find myself very happy when I'm behind the lens. When I go on vacation, I got a whole bag full of cameras and video cameras and
Mhm.
all that good stuff. So having you on sort of pushing me to get back to my things that I love to do.
Right, right. And it is definitely, I say that, I don't have any children. My two children now are baking and writing. Baking is definitely the golden child, doesn't
Yeah.
cause me problems. Writing is my black sheep, causes me major consternation, but love them both equally. Just one's a little easier for me than the other.
So 2 more questions before we end. So looking back,
Okay.
what's the biggest lesson your dating misadventures taught you about your self-worth and happiness?
A lot of times I think um I hid who I was in a way to fit in with the people that I was with. I think the term that people use now is extra. I'm extra. I have a lot of opinions. I can have a pretty foul mouth sometimes. I'm big and I'm loud. You know, you're taught that men don't like that, or men want you to maybe be a little bit quieter or a little bit more delicate or feminine or whatever it is. And so I think for a lot of years I did that, and I wasn't necessarily, not that I was showing somebody different than who I am, but I was showing a shadow of who I am.
Yeah.
So I think that that's the one thing that I've really learned, is to just be myself, and somebody's going to love me or they're not. Not everyone's going to love me, and I just got to be okay with that.
Yeah, no, that's like, my ex-girlfriend, that's one of the biggest things I loved about her was I just let her be herself. Like you said, she you're very loud and boisterous, and that's how she was, and foul mouth and
Yeah.
F-bombs, and it didn't bother me. And I would say to her, just I love you for who you are. Be yourself.
Right.
I just, I'm one to, I'm gonna be myself. I'm gonna have my struggles. I'm gonna have my problems. I'll let you know that I'm not a perfect person. None of us are. But I don't want anybody to change, or I don't want to change to be with someone. Just like I
Right.
would want someone to change to be with me.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
I love people that are authentic and real, and they can be themselves. Because if you go into a relationship thinking you're going to change somebody, that's a relationship you shouldn't be in, and
It's
you shouldn't want to
doomed.
be in.
Yeah. It's doomed. It's
Yeah,
doomed.
it's doomed from the beginning. Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
one piece of advice I can give to people is, I love hard. I love with all I have. I had a very great upbringing with my mom and dad and my grandparents, who always showed me unconditional love. So I always try to heap that unconditional love on people that, I fall in love with. And I tell people all the time, when you love someone, you love them. You know, I don't fall out of love. It's one of those things. And I love hard, but I also hurt hard too. You know,
Yeah, I've had my share of those as well. And that was one of the relationships that I chronicle in the book is Brett. And I sort of talk about that he liked me for who I was, but then throughout this relationship, I turned into, versus being Julie, I turned into being Brett's girlfriend. And I'm like, well, how can he continue to like me when I am not the person that he met in the beginning? It was all about him and doing what he wanted to do and going where he wanted to go. And I sort of just was like, I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. Sure, whatever you want to do, versus being a participant in our relationship. I wasn't a full participant in our relationship. And that's never going to work long term. Like
no,
that's a big red flag right there.
being a partner, that's what a partnership is.
Yeah.
Doing, sacrificing one for the other, but also not sacrificing yourself 100% of the time.
Right. You need to make concessions in any relationship, but you can't completely push down who you are as a person to make the other person happy, or feel like you're walking on eggshells with that person and what you want or what your opinions are.
Yeah. Yeah. And I say it all the time. There's 8 billion people in this world. There's somebody for all of us.
Right.
There is, whether you find it at 20, your high school sweetheart, or whether you find it at 25, 35, 45, 55, 65, whatever age it may be. But,
Right.
Eventually you will, or, you'll have baking and writing.
Or you just continue to love yourself. That works
Exactly.
too.
Just like me, I love myself and I'll have my podcast forever. So if that's my relationship, there it is.
Right.
I'll be happy. So last question: if someone
Okay.
reads "Gluten for Punishment" and feels seen for the first time, what would that mean to you?
Absolutely everything. I mean, that is why I wrote it. I didn't write it. I knew I wouldn't get rich off of it. That's not why I wrote it. I want people to see themselves in the stories. Like that means everything to me. If people can relate to what it said and the stories resonate for them, that's it right there. I'm happy. I can go home happy.
So before I do my closing, right, let people know where they can find your book and where they can find you.
So I'm at twobitTart.com. So it's TWOBITTART.com. Gluten for Punishment is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, or in some of independent bookstores in and around. I've actually been hitting up the Boston area. So maybe in your local bookstore, I would be there. Hey, the next sort of in-person event I've got is not until March, and I will actually be in Tucson, Arizona for a show that's out there. So
Awesome.
yeah, so update, my website actually updates the in-person events that I do, and people can absolutely go and check it out and see where I'm going to be. Reach out to me there as well.
Perfect. Julie, what an absolute joy and inspiration you've been today.
It's been
Your
a great
courage-
chat.
Thank you so much. Your courage to turn heartbreak into humor, vulnerability into a beautiful memoir, and baking into a lifeline is something we all need to hear. Thank you for showing us that it's never too late to rewrite your story, that single life can be rich and full, and that sometimes the sweetest comfort comes from your own oven, not someone else's arms. To our listeners, go grab Gluten for Punishment, just desserts for the heartbroken, lovesick, and jilted. It's available now, and trust me, it's the perfect mix of laughs, hot, and mouth-watering recipes. Julie, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for sharing your journey so openly and so generously. You've reminded us all that we're stronger and probably better bakers than we can think. Come back anytime. We'd love to have you. Until next time, chasing your own version of sweet. Uncle Jimmy out. Thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you, Jimmy.